The Trans-Mississippi Theater of the American Civil War involved all of the states and territories of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Around 200,000 Union soldiers would serve in this theater of war. The Confederacy had 58,000 from Texas, 53,000 from Louisiana, 43,000 from Arkansas, 40,000 from Missouri, and 5,000 from Indian territories, coming to a total of around 200,000 that would serve in both the Eastern Theater and in the Trans-Mississippi. Both sides had their goals and reasons for conducting operations in this theater. For the Union, it was to hold control of Missouri, pacify western Louisiana, establish a presence in Texas, and to secure control of gold deposits in Colorado and California. For the Confederacy, the southwest region of the Trans-Mississippi alone gave 800,000 oxen, 300,000 mules, 1 million horses, and millions of cattle. The entire region also provided much needed manpower and gave the Confederacy agricultural commodities such as cotton, sugar, and rice. In terms of New Mexico and Arizona, in 1862, Brigadier General Henry H. Sibley would invade parts of New Mexico with an army of around 3,700. The year before, Confederate sympathizers in Arizona had raised an army in hope of waging war with its neighbor, New Mexico. Sibley and his army would march north along the Rio Grande River from El Paso, Texas to Fort Craig, which is just south of Albuquerque, making his march over 260 miles. Fort Craig, with its 1,250 U.S. regulars, was commanded by Colonel Edward R. S. Canby. Initially, Sibley would win a small victory in Valverde Ford in the Rio Grande and at the Battle of Glorieta Pass against 1,000 fresh Colorado volunteers. Unfortunately for Sibley, while most of the Union forces routed at Glorieta Pass, Major John M. Chivington would lead an attack that would destroy most of the supply train of the Confederates, forcing Sibley to retreat 700 miles to San Antonio. Now, let's look at Missouri and Arkansas. Although Missouri was a slave-owning state, with much of its population being pro-Confederate, the state itself was officially neutral. The Union realized early on that if they were to hold control of the Trans-Mississippi, specifically the Mississippi River, then Missouri would have to be pacified. In 1861, Brigadier General Nathaniel Lyon would leave his base in St. Louis with 5,400 troops and march into southwest Missouri to fight the Battle of Wilson's Creek or Bloody Hill, in which Lyon would separate his army with Colonel Franz Sigel in order to launch simultaneous attacks against the Union flanks. Colonel Sigel would have initial success, but would, after a Confederate counteroffensive, be routed. Not knowing of this, Lyon would hold up a ferocious defense, but by the end of the Confederate victory, would be the first U.S. Army combat general to die during the Civil War. The Battle of Wilson's Creek, which happened right after Bull Run, ended with 1,317 Federal casualties, with 258 killed and 873 wounded. The Confederates would take 1,222 casualties, with 277 dead and 945 wounded. In December of that same year, Brigadier General Samuel R. Curtis, with 12,000 men, would march south to take Springfield, Missouri, chasing the Confederate Army all the way into Arkansas. This would lead to the Battle of Pea Ridge, in which the Confederates, led by General Benjamin McCulloch, would go on a daring flanking maneuver, attempting to send their force of 8,000 men on the Union right flank. Colonel Osterhaus, who was in control of the right Union flank, ordered his cavalry and artillery to counter the Confederates. Although this originally routed the Union, McCulloch would be killed in battle while tending to his battle lines. Unfortunately for the Confederates, tragedy would strike again as their new first-in-command, General James McIntosh, would fall during the final cavalry charge, leading the Confederates to pull back after losing 2 commanding officers in 2 hours. This was the first day of a 2-day battle which involved 30,000 men, in which the Union would gain an important victory over the Confederates, helping them gain control of much of Missouri and southern Arkansas, and would lead to the Union gaining control of Little Rock in September of 1862, forcing Confederate forces to the southwest region of Arkansas. In terms of Texas and Louisiana, Lincoln would be put under pressure to launch an invasion of Texas, sending Nathaniel P. Banks with 40,000 soldiers to New Orleans. Half of these troops were enlisted from New England and New York. Banks' first move was a campaign in the Bayou Teche region in 1863. General Zachary Taylor, with 16,000 Confederates, had been harassing the Federal lines of communication in this region. Banks' army would drive them all the way to Alexandria in North Louisiana. Following this would be the Battle of Port Hudson, in which 30,000 Federal troops would conduct a siege against 7,500 Confederates that would last from late May 1863 to early June 1863. Although the attempts to take the port had failed, leading to the siege, the Confederates would surrender on July 9th after learning that Vicksburg had surrendered on July 4th. The invasion of Mexico and the taking of Mexico City by France, led by Napoleon III in 1863, would lead to a failed attempt to capture Sabine Pass in Texas. William B. Franklin would lead a failed naval invasion with 5,000 soldiers, in which they would be repelled by a Confederate force numbering only 42 men, led by Irish-born immigrant Texan named Richard W. Dowling. The small Irish-born Texan army would decimate the Union fleet, disabling 2 ships, inflicting 375 casualties, while taking none themselves. After this failure, Lincoln would be put under pressure to send an invasion force into the Red River Valley. With the help of Frederick Steele's Arkansas Army, William Sherman's Tennessee Army, and Admiral David D. Porter's fleet, Banks would attempt to take Shreveport, the new capital of the Confederate Trans-Mississippi. The leader of the Confederate Army was Lieutenant General Richard Taylor. David D. Porter's fleet would be the largest fleet assembled in North American waters, with 104 vessels consisting of ironclads, tinclads, and transports. This would lead to the Battle of Mansfield or Sabine Crossroads, where the Confederates would defeat the Federal Army. The Federals would take 2,200 casualties out of 12,000, while the Confederates lost 1,000 out of 8,800. It would also lead to another Confederate victory at the Battle of Pleasant Hill, where each side would engage with around 12,000 men, with the Union losing 1,400 and the Confederates losing 1,700. The campaign was a defeat for the Union. Not only did they not accomplish their objectives, but they would lose 2 major battles. The Union alone in the Red River Campaign would lose 5,400 men, 20 guns, 200 wagons, and 1,000 horses, while the Confederates lost around 4,000 men. Richard Taylor was able to repel a Union army 3 times larger than his own. He was able to save the political industrial center at Shreveport, successfully defend the Red River Valley, and secure Texas. It is important to note that there are many other battles and many campaigns that occurred in this theater of the American Civil War, and I only covered a few. Also important to note that there is much more to learn about this theater in the Civil War, such as economics, tactics, logistics, weapons, and etc. And this was meant to give a rough intro into the topic. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to more videos on American history.